Okay, we're gonna try and make this video again. Last time I made this video, my boss called me in the middle of it and I hanged up. So, round two, I guess. Anyways, I'm getting pizza for dinner. My mom texted me, she's like, can you get me a pizza? I'll pay you back. I'm like, Mom, you don't have to pay me back for getting you a pizza. Like, Mom, it's just a pizza. Anyways, so, these roads are crazy. Of course it turns yellow as soon as I get here. Anyways, I guess enough rambling and get into what we're trying to talk about. So, I'm going to preference this by saying trigger warning. We will be talking about eating disorders and disordered eating. And with that being said, eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. And so, and I think a lot of people don't realize how serious and how deadly and dangerous they are. So my testimony was I battled with an eating disorder, disordered eating, and for the rest of the video I'm gonna like say ED where I don't get flagged. I battled with it since I was 14 years old, but the disordered eating was always kind of there because I remember like I was about like 8 or 9 and I'm like I kind of started watching. I didn't know what calories were, but I knew like what trans fat was and all that. Like I said, that meant no 8-year-old should really have a concept of that, in my opinion. And I was raised in the early 2000s. The 2000s was a much different time than we have now. And with that being said, so I was always very picky eater. I didn't really like a lot of meat. I didn't really like dairy. I can't have dairy now, but so I was very picky. I was very like conscious of my body, and I was always taller than all the other kids. So that kind of made me more like conscious because I was always like taller and I was always older than everybody because I got held back, and like all the kids at my church or in my neighborhood, I was always the oldest. So I was always like the biggest. I went into, I'm glad you decided to turn. I went into my 8th grade year, like I said, I was always the biggest. I was more developed than all the other girls. I went into my 8th grade year. That's kind of really when it started making presence. I started like really restricting, over exercising. If I ate anything, I went running around the block, around the neighborhood. It wasn't until later on, my 8th grade year, I started dealing with the bulimia side. And at 14 years old, I didn't understand what I was doing. Like, I didn't self-conscious be like, wake up one day, I'm gonna have an eating disorder. I didn't do that. I didn't understand what I was doing was gonna have lifelong struggles, lifelong consequences. I didn't get that. I didn't understand that. I just remember hating my body and just absolutely being so frustrated at it. And I remember anytime I would eat, I would just have this awful fear, just this crippling fear, like I'm gonna gain 10 pounds off of just this one little thing. And that was so terrifying. I remember just like laying in my bathroom or just laying on my bedroom floor, just shaking. I'm so fat. I've gained so much weight, like over the littlest thing, and that continued all through my high school years. But when my junior year happened, and it was right around prom, I had a guidance counselor. This might be another story about this guidance counselor. I had this guidance counselor. Now, kind of looking back, there was a lot of red flags with her, and I told her I would go to her office because I had dyslexia. I have dyslexia, and so she would do like a lot of my testing. Like if I had a test, she would like read it to me, and like she was on this diet. And let me preference this: she wasn't very big. Like, she was a very petite woman, and it was like this diet with all these points. Like she would add up all these points, and she's like, "Well, I can't eat anything else for the rest of the day." And so I started going to her for like actually talking to her as a counselor. And I'm like, I want to lose weight because prom is coming around. Because every girl always goes on a diet before prom, you know. And she's like, okay. So she got me like this calorie counting book, and she's like, just start counting your calories. I do want to preface, since I have never even told my therapist this. It's not funny. She's like, okay, well, we'll just start counting your calories, and you come to me every day, and I'll just look at it, you know, if you want to lose weight. And when I say I didn't need to lose weight, I needed to like gain muscle and, you know, like kind of like something like that. But I really didn't need to be losing weight at 17 years old. So I would go to her office, and she would like count my calories, and she's like, okay, well, we need to try to get my therapist is gonna love our next session. She's like, okay, so we need to like try to stay in the 1200 range. And I'm going to say this, I am not certified in any dietitian or anything like that, but for a 17-year-old girl, 1200 calories is not a lot. So I would try to get under that. And then it was just kind of to the point, I'm like, okay, I'm going over. And she told me, she's like, you can have 3 Snicker bars in a day, and that will still count. You know, you'll be under your 1200, you know, you hit just right there. So I'm like, okay, cool. And then it just got to the point, the calories, I'm like, I'm getting too many calories, I'm getting so much calories. I started purging. And with that, she kind of, when I would come back to her, I'm like, okay, here's my like notebook, and I wrote down that I purged. She's like, okay, well, we're purging now, like this is early signs of bulimia. I'm like, okay. I'm like, mentally I didn't understand it, like I didn't have the education like I do now with eating disorders, with EDs. And I'm like, okay. And then after that, it kept on about 2 more times. I was still purging. I would go to her every day, give her my notebook with my calories in it, and she's like, well, we're just gonna come off this diet because you're throwing up now. I'm like, okay. And so that took me down a cycle of the binging, the purging, and the restricting. That continued for the rest of my high school senior year. I got into college, and there was, because I went out of state for college, so there was a lot more food options that I've never heard of, you know, being in the deep South. There was so much stuff, so I started binging, and that continued on in college. And when I dropped out of college going into my second semester of my sophomore year. I dropped out, and with that, I came back home. I got in a toxic relationship with my ex that he kind of like, he would put me on these diets or tell me what kind of diets to try, or we'd go to the gym and he'd be like, okay, you need to lose this and this. Well, and at this point, my parents was getting divorced, and that is really when it became a full-blown disorder at that point. I lost about 40 pounds, and that continued to be a struggle from age 20 until age 29. And during COVID was the absolutely worst it ever was. I was to the point that they were just labeling me as a chronic anorexic, and that there would be no hope. I tried to get into multiple inpatients. They're like, well, at this point, if an eating disorder has gone on for this many years, there's no hope, there's no recovery. And 2021, my mom got sick with COVID. I got assaulted during this time, and the bulimia turned into full-blown bulimia. And throughout all of this years, I was abusing diuretics, laxatives, enemas, diet pills, anything and everything to stay small, to